Hello, everyone, and welcome to this interview episode with What's New in Cloud FinOps with myself, Steven Old, my good friend.
Frank Contrepois.
I went back to Steven Old, Frank. It didn't
Yes.
last. It lasted one episode. Today, we have got a great guest with us and one who has been incredibly patient with me because I managed to miss our previous recording. So without too much further ado, we've got Yasmin Rajabi from CloudBot, who is a COO. And today we are going to talk about all sorts. But let's start, Yasmin. Thanks for coming. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Thanks for having me. So I do a lot of random things here at CloudBot, but mainly I run product and engineering, and that's been most of my background for my career. I came to CloudBot through the acquisition of Stormforge a little over a year ago, actually. So we've been here for a year now, which is funny because it feels like we've been working together much longer than a year with this team. But part of that is because even before we got acquired, we were partners. Stormforge and CloudBot partnered a little over a year before that. So, it's been a while getting to know the team and working with them. And that's kind of also what brought me towards the FinOps space. So CloudBot has a portfolio of products, the cloud management platform, more of a like FinOps, BillOps tooling for large MSPs that need to break down data, re-rate it, tweak it, tune it, all of that. And then also Stormforge is the Kubernetes right-sizing solution. So it's also a little bit of a full circle moment for me because before I was at Stormforge, I was at Puppet, and Puppet does config management. Yeah. And I used to come up against CloudBot, and I had a product called Puppet Bolt, and they were called CloudBot, and it drove me crazy. I was like, no, there can only be one Bolt. And so I used to see them a lot. And then now actually working at the company is just very funny to me. And we have a lot of ex-Puppet people that came to Stormforge and then now CloudBot. So it's just I don't know, it's a funny full circle moment for all of us. Most of that time at those different companies was mostly product, a little bit of strategy, some engineering stuff, like management. And then before that, I was an actual engineer. Was where I started out my career. Have not gone back since. The team always likes to joke of we don't want you writing any code, which I don't think I could. Now with
I've started again recently, and I've recently been told to stop being a cowboy because I seem to have lost all of my good practices.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know that I ever had any to begin with, if I'm being honest.
I'm like you. I would have the ideas that this is a new algorithm. We can use that. Make it work in a decent way, please.
I just hack it together in any way I could. It's the result that matters to me rather than the tidiness. I am the problem. I understand that I am wrong in that. So that's interesting. So what did I know this has nothing to do with what I'm talking. So what did Puppet Bolt do?
So Puppet Bolt still exists. It's so Puppet, it was always declarative configuration management. Yes. Puppet took that and allowed you to do it kind of on demand. So instead of waiting, detecting drift, and then applying changes with Puppet Bolt, it's more like the Ansible type of okay, I can go tell it to do something. And so that was probably the biggest difference. You could take everything the Puppet portfolio and rather than have it managed in a declarative way, just imperatively say okay, go do this, or run this in this order. With Puppet, it's kind of self-deterministic of how and when things will run. With Puppet Bolt, you could be very specific on okay, I want you to do these things in this order, but it used all the same content. So you could take what you had and then apply it when you need to. And I don't know, every once in a while, I still talk to some people that are there and they tell me some of the cool use cases that they're using Bolt for, which is nice. It still feels...
Yes.
I was very emotionally attached to that product. So it's still nice to hear.
And I think it's going to come back. The more I talk with people and you talk about agents, etc., and there was quite a well-known CTO saying, there are some deterministic stuff that I want to do 1, 2, 3, and then delegate, not before. And I think we'll go back to having a really strong structure of deterministic aspects and passing it to LLMs and again. Anyway, that
makes sense. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, we were a big Puppet house back in Clarinet. We had a company called Bastian. A guy called Sam Bastian was a big believer. He kind of created the concept of masterless Puppet. He was an exceptionally clever man, and so we used it all over the place. And I hadn't done anything like it before, and it was a real changed to it broke my brain for a bit, really, the concept of declarative, like how clever that is, because I think in deterministic steps. So this idea, but I'd see a use case for both. I hadn't really thought about that, Frank. That is super interesting. But moving on, we got to Stormforge, and so you're getting into the Kubernetes world, right?
Yeah. So my move from Puppet to Stormforge was there was someone that was at Puppet that went and was like, "Hey, I really like it here." And the company at the time was headquartered locally to where I lived, which was also nice.
That always helps. Yeah.
It definitely helps. It's a remote company, but like the HQ, the shared office was like close. And I wanted to do something different, something slightly smaller. And then Kubernetes was just like where everyone was going, because I talk to infrastructure people every day, and like everyone's using Kubernetes. And I wanted to learn and do something new. So moved over to Stormforge, built up the product organization, brought a bunch of people over that I used to work with, and really enjoyed the team there. And we ended up rebuilding the product, launching it, scaling it, and then got acquired. So it's been a fun journey. There are a lot of roller coasters and ups and downs, I will be very honest.
Yes, well, that's always the case.
There's a few people we've had on over the years who have rebuilt a product. Yes. And it always seems when you're a product business and like that is what you do, it seems like such an extreme thing to do. But most of the time is the right thing to do, right? Like if you can tell us, what drove you to kind of go, right, we need to do this a different way?
Yeah. No, I can totally tell you. So the first version of the product at the Stormforge product, actually, this is technically not the first version. This is the second version. The first version was a heavy like machine learning experimentation tool. So you could run a bunch of machine learning experiments. It would give you all the different configurations that you could go with, and you could tune that based on like performance, or you tune it based on cost, or find something in the middle. And it was awesome. It was like incredibly powerful. We had a bunch of PhDs that built it, but it was exactly that. It was incredibly powerful. No one could really use it or consume it. And at that time, like Kubernetes was still really early in the journey. I think this is like 2019. And so not enough organizations.
So it's before EKS and stuff like that, I guess? EKS, they just arriving then?
Yeah, I think just arriving, or maybe it's been there for a little bit. So this is also before my time, I should caveat. Right. Like this was what the team had built. And people didn't know enough about their Kubernetes environment, and then also the app. So you needed someone from the app team, you needed someone from the testing team to generate the data, you needed someone to understand Kubernetes. You needed a lot to get something super value out of it. But at that stage, there wasn't enough people that had those teams. Now that's like table stakes. Of course, you have a Kubernetes performance engineering team. And so the first pivot was to get to a product that pulled based on live data, pulled from like your Datadog, your Prometheus, and was able to consolidate the requirements on the customer's end to be able to get there. However, this was all on-prem. So getting to the point of your like, why did we make the decision? We started onboarding some like fairly large customers. Good or bad, one of EKS's largest customers which clarifies that yes, EKS was around then. One of EKS's largest customers is one of our customers. And so that forced us to do a scale up front. Like we had no choice. We brought them on. And the first version of the product was deployed on-prem. So the customer on one hand had control over all their data, all their metrics, but on the other hand, they had to store it. They had to scale it. They had to manage it when it goes down. If there was an issue with the product, they had to call us. We had to like Zoom share and try and figure it out. And that on-prem model for optimization, don't get me wrong, works in some environments, air gap, you need that. But in most, especially large scaled ones or environments where you have a high workload to cluster ratio, on-prem optimization solutions just don't work. You're going to have to manage that. And then it's also what some of our customers, one of our larger bank customers was like, I'm going to have to pay how much to just actually manage the
just for it to sit there. Yeah.
This defeats the point. And so that really is what forced us to build the product from the ground up as a SaaS. A lot of the concepts, the machine learning, all of that was reused. It's not like we threw it out the window. We knew it worked. But we moved the model to be as lightweight as possible in the customer's cluster, scrape the metrics, send it to our backend. We worked with AWS to really scale that out. And we've now, like, that scale helps us deliver the product in a more efficient way to the customers, in a faster way. And that, we've never looked back since.
And did you hit an issue, and maybe you didn't because of when you came around, but so when I was working on solutions with Kubernetes was before EKS and stuff. So even when we were deploying on AWS, we were still running the, our own, what do you call it now?
All of it.
Well, yeah, the box that runs it, the controller. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you imagine controller plane. When you had to move to, this is entirely just my interest. So sorry, listeners. Did you have challenges with accessing the data when the control plane becomes managed versus when you owned the control, or when clients owned the control plane? So, like, getting the same stuff out of AKS as you were when you had your control VM.
It's a good question. I don't know that I could give you an honest answer because I wasn't, like, physically at Stormforge when we had the first version of the product. I would say that, like, nowadays everything has been so standard for us that doesn't matter if you're running on EKS, AKS, as long as it's Kubernetes, we can get access to the data that we need.
I just felt that back in the day, we seemed to go backwards in terms of our visibility into our Kubernetes stacks around that point when we started moving to that and we lost the control plane. And I'd kind of stepped away from it enough by then into the FinOps space that I didn't know if it was because of data access or anything like that. And obviously you guys are using so much data to be able to do your pieces. And I guess I try not to ask product questions, but this is just more out of interest. So if you're doing the optimization stuff, you're having to do the visibility stuff to understand that, right? So you
totally, yep,
yeah. Cool.
And that's the part that we kind of flipped on its head of, instead of having the visibility, the access, the compute, the, like, machine learning, all of that in the customer's cluster, we do all of that in our backend. So all our agent does is scrape, like, a list of 20 metrics around usage. And then all of the patterns, all of the storage, like, we have a forecasting algorithm, we have a seasonality algorithm, we have one that looks at your HPA scaling behavior and then maps it to vertical right sizing recommendations. All of that runs in our backend.
Okay. And last question before I let Frank bring us back onto topic. Do you focus on Node or Pod or both?
We focus on Pod, and we work with Carpenter for the Node side of the house.
Makes sense. Doesn't it?
Like, Carpenter's the best, and it's open source and everyone can use it. And even, like, if you want a paid version, Auto Mode is available on EKS. Azure has a managed Carpenter solution as well. What we do from a node level is, like, after we optimize the pods, the workload profiles change, the shapes change. So we use our machine learning to be like, okay, now that you've right-sized, these workloads are better suited for these types of shape nodes. So you can kind of reduce waste at the node level as well. But we just work with Carpenter on all of the right-sizing and everything.
Yeah,
it's very funny on the story side of things, because for me, Kubernetes was roughly the time I've decided that no, I'm not going to go another virtualization layer. And I said, okay, I've managed servers. Then I was in the Solaris space also. We had, on one side, we had Sun and virtualization. Then you had virtualization. You had mainframe virtualization. Then you have VMware, and I was all over it. And then I was like, no, not another box that I'm going to virtualize. Inside my previous box. I think at one point I was on the storage side of things and I counted the layers of abstraction, and that was the time I was Veritas and this kind of stuff. And I counted that between the operating system and the disk, there were 12 layers. I was like, this is just, I'm out of this. If I can, I'm out of this. That's why I took a 1-year holiday. So that was a good point.
Indeed.
And coming back, I decided that FinOps was a funnier, more complicated things because human were involved, and it was not the same stuff, just more. At least that's my view. But yeah.
Again, not yet getting to the point that we're meant to be talking about. But Yasmin, do you find because obviously you've got to then attach it back to billing data. Have you found, because I've been doing projects on all different clouds recently on the FinOps side, and I do find differences, and I don't know if it's just because I've got history with some, so I know them better. Are there, in terms of how you guys have to handle your product, are there clouds that are easier for you to connect your costs to your compute at the Kubernetes layer versus others? You don't have to name your favorites, but
I mean, easier in terms of, like, there are certain clouds that we have better relationships with. So if we need something, we can get someone on the phone very quickly. But the decision we made from our billing data is to go the focus route. And everybody's data looks the same. Big asterisk, not everybody's focus data. Theoretically, everyone's focus data should look the same. So our ability to scrape the data kind of looks the same, except for like obviously a little differently for each cloud. But that's helped a ton.
Sorry, another rabbit hole. I keep saying we'll go back to. How do you handle the fact that from my memory, one of the cloud is on version 1.
Yeah.
Another one's on 1.2 and one's on 1.3. That's
I think you're right.
They all have asterisk, by the way.
Yeah,
they all have a page telling you, oh, by the way, we don't support this, which is
that
where
thing,
you see that they take
that can't be null is null.
Yeah.
But if
they are all taking their own billing data and transforming it to focus, and that is perfectly visible when you look at them. I think they were saying that there are 2 companies that just came in to focus that are focus first, and they're only delivering focus, and that Versal and Nimbus. Everyone else is doing some conversion somewhere. So yes,
I did see one of the SaaS tools is like is like on the newest version, like straight away. That's just quite impressive. But yeah, does that cause you any issues? The fact that there's focus and there's focus, right?
Yes.
Yes. There's a lot of nodding for those who can't see.
I mean, it causes engineering issues that we have to like plan for and build around, and essentially like for some clouds augment. But I still think the benefits for the end user are worth it. It's just the engineering costs are slightly higher for us. But then we're also saving engineering costs because we don't have to build a solution for each cloud.
Exactly.
We can build one solution that is just by default supported, and then like spend the time on the areas that are not supported.
Also, the conversion is interesting. The conversion, even if you get something else, the billing data, having a standard centralized format that is supported in some form or way effectively really helps. I remember because every cloud tool, every FinOps tool was using their own internal format. You're not the first one I hear that they say, no, internally we're in focus. There is no version. The one I was talking about said, no, we don't have a version. We've changed stuff. We made it ours.
You're pulling in different versions, right?
Exactly.
The reason I wanted to dig into that, see if you did, is because people speak to me a lot. So I do a lot of tooling advisory stuff, and people kind of go, we're just thinking about maybe focus on multi-cloud. And it's a case of, no, I love that, but do bear in mind that doesn't mean you're going to get the exact same data. There are still differences, and it's worth noting. Right, Frank, what are we meant to be talking about after?
We're meant to ask Yasmin, because when we started, we had a green ops, and she said, yeah, well, I love this. I have another better topic. So here we go. I'm passing the package immediately to Yasmin without any further ado.
Well, you actually just said it of when you took your year vacation, then you wanted to get into something that's the people side of the problem.
Yes,
that like is exactly the thing that we're seeing, even just in Kubernetes infrastructure, because you can have best tooling, best anything, if the people that get paged in the middle of the night don't trust that they're not going to get paged in the middle of the night, it doesn't matter. And that's the thing that I've been kind of really talking to people about. This resonates with me a lot, because if you're working with someone, doesn't matter if it's tooling, technology, you want to get something done. If that person doesn't trust you, then you have to spend the time to build that trust. You can try and like ram it down their throat and be like, okay, we're just gonna do this. I know it. I know exactly what I'm doing. We're just gonna do it. That never works. Like you could be CEO of a company, it's not gonna work. You have to get people to buy in, and it's the same when we just bring it down the level of Kubernetes right sizing. So the thing that we do with StormForge. What you're doing is you're going to the teams that are going to get the page at the end of the day and telling them, hey, I can see there's a lot of waste. Trust me, I'm going to reduce this waste. Nothing will happen. And you could have all the science behind it, all of everything to prove why it's going to get right the first time, the second time, maybe even the 10th time. But anyone who is an engineer knows stuff breaks. There's no way to avoid it. Stuff breaks. There is a way to make sure 99.999% of the time it doesn't, but there is still that's why people have these budgets of I have an SLA budget. I know sometimes something will go down. So the way that you build trust is, what do you do when something goes wrong? And that's kind of how I've shifted my conversation when I talk to users in the community of what do you think about when something goes wrong? What do you worry about the most? What are the things that give you the confidence that if something goes wrong, the system will fix itself. You will know what you need to know. The right person will get paged about what they need to know. And what I've found is that allows people to kind of breathe and be like, okay, you understand that I'm not being irrational, that that I have real fears here.
Yes.
And you're going to address those real fears. You're not just going to tell me, oh, I'm going to save you all this. Because I know I could stand here on my life and say, we will save 99% of people money, because there's just so much waste out there. Everybody over provisions.
And that was something we were talking about before, but both of you have talked about something that brings this perfectly together. Firstly, the human nature of this, Yasmin, like you're saying, like the worry of the human nature. But going to what Frank said earlier about the amount of layers of abstraction, what happens is humans get involved in every layer of that abstraction, and they add in headroom. Well, I don't want it to break, so I'll put in 20% additional. Now, when that was a VM, so when that was a physical machine, okay, that was one lot of problems, but now we're going into physical machines, into virtual machines, into containers, and at every layer, we're getting that headroom added. And so, like you say, by the time you get to the Kubernetes thing, and conceptually, and we've got a really mixed audience here, some techies, some non-techies, right? So conceptually, I like I'm sure you've all seen it in the past, where you have the jar and someone has like sand, small pebbles, big stones, right? And if you put in the sand first, by the end you can't get the big stones in, but if you put the big stones in, the idea is if we're getting these smaller pieces, we should be able to be more efficient and put more in there. And and containers, I think serverless is probably the sand, but we're at least on small pebbles in containers. But the reality is, even though the idea of being able to pack stuff into smaller pieces and goes, if you're adding the headroom in, I'm not saying you'd lose all of that benefit, but I think sometimes maybe half of it gets lost.
For sure.
But
you see that too.
Going back to Yasmin also point is that every time you add a layer, for me in my head, engineer head, and I was managing thousands of production servers, I can tell you it was, you're just adding something that can break, or you're probably adding 100 things that can break. And just for the fun story, because that's it goes with it. That's the reason now I can breathe for whatever problem happens in FinOps. Is that I used to manage healthcare and hospitals.
Yeah.
And they called me at 3 a.m. and it was no internet in the hotel at the time. They called me at 3 a.m. and say, we have someone on the table. You have 5 minutes. The blood bank is not working. That was the time. By the way, the person didn't die because the morning after they told me no one died tonight. So I was extremely happy. But the way we've solved it is roughly as you say, it was an Oracle cluster at the time was blocked. I just said my database, do kill 9 on that stuff. And we just pray that all the system we've put in place is going to work fast. So we did it in 4 minutes. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. But that was the kind of thing that it almost never fails. Yeah. Yes. In a year, I only had 2 problems. One was this one, and it was an application just failing at the wrong moment. It was trivial to solve. And another one is we've lost, for corruption of data, 5 minutes of A&E, so emergency services in the hospital. It took them 3 days to recopy from hand. 5 minutes. Those are the 2, and from that day on, I say, we're going to lose money. I don't care. That's just money. I mean, come on.
And I think that I say that, we've both said this to people in the past because, Yasmin, you know what it's like. In any industry, when you see your job, it feels super important. But I do have to remind people sometimes, no one died because we're FinOps. Just, I think calling it a FinOps is a little bit tongue-in-cheek in itself. But, the system, and this is what I think people forget at times because we feel our world's so important. The things these engineers may be looking after, and we did a great one with was it Mel Pinto?
Yes.
Came on to talk about engineering fatigue, and the alerts, and just having someone send you a bloody CSV of optimizations that no one's ever read through on an email, versus the rest of the systems that are whirring at them, or that they're even trying to make sure don't go off. There is a massive human element to that, isn't there? It's a very different job. And I'm not saying FinOps isn't important for people that they can't help. But when you're speaking to engineers, the systems they can be looking after, like say, Frank and Yasmin, there's real worry about changes being made, especially in an automated way. It feels like a massive lack of control, right? It's if you're asking them to right-size something themselves, at least they can kind of oversee it. But when you give them the keys to the the castle, as it were.
You can roll back fast. And I think that was for
me.
Is I know what I've done, and I did a really wrong configuration. You have the system down. You know exactly what you need to roll back. When they give you something at 3 a.m. and say, "Oh, that doesn't work," oh, that's a good start.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, we are blocking Yasmin.
Yeah, we can blue-green stuff as well, kind of, in that case.
I mean, Frank's story is like, how would I go to Frank and be like, "Hey, don't worry about the thing you experienced. It's not going to happen again."
Yes.
There's no I could give you any information in the world and it could all be right. There's no way, because you've lived that experience and you know that something will go wrong. So what you're going to ask me is what happens on that day when I get what do I do then?
And what do you do then, Yasmin?
Well, I would also maybe tell you if something is health critical, and we do this with our customers too. Like we have modes in our product where it's like, hey, this is actually reliability. We will make sure it always has an extra buffer because we can afford. It is the right decision to have waste, knowing that situations like what Frank described are real. And so, like, rather than Frank having to think about it, you could just categorize it and say, these workloads are my reliability workloads. Like, add a buffer there, keep it safe. These workloads I can be more aggressive on, but Frank mentioned rollback. It's putting in automated rollback. It's putting in health checks to detect issues. And then it's also taking a look at the scenario. When things go down, how do you get back up as quickly as possible? How does the product react? How does the product inform? And then how does the product at that point give the human as many controls as they need to get to what they need to get done? And it's the switch of the focus of like, we're not going to just tell you like, here's all the things we can do in a happy path. And what's great is we're going to focus on, here are the things that are going to go wrong. And we're going to be honest about them and put those on the table and tell you how we address them. And if you're not confident, that's fine. Like it's our job to make sure you're confident. I don't want to ever feel like people are forced to do something, because you mentioned the other podcast person that came on, someone will send a spreadsheet of here are all the optimizations. There's no world where like forcing that someone's just going to do it. Maybe there's some organization that is like draconian and says you must do this, but people don't get fired for over provisioning. People get fired when things go down. If you can't get that system back online at 3 a.m. Like, yes, not saying it's your fault, Frank, but like that scenario creates tension and creates cause of dealing with that tension.
There is a very interesting point we were doing at one point is we are getting into an area where it's extremely hard. When things go well, it's extremely hard to pinpoint who's done the good work.
Yes.
While if something fails today, there are tons of tools that will tell you the commit and the person that did that piece of code, whatever that is. It's so easy. There is an approach to tooling that effectively helps in some way the blame. That's why I am for what I call top-down FinOps. Is you let the people at the top make decisions, risk reward, and you say, yeah, if we do this, that's the risk. Do we agree as a company to take that risk? Yes.
I've told you this before, Frank. I went to a client. Maybe this says about how much they trust me as the director. And I said, and it was actually Kubernetes that happens. I said, that platform, I think I can save you $12 million. And he said, I'll pay you $100 million to never touch it. It's so important. And I was just like, well, that is your decision. That's absolutely fine, right?
I am totally signing that contract.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I've never done anything, so I think you already owe me money.
Yes. But that's the good old thing. If it works, you don't touch. Some people joke about it, but there is some sort of a reality to it that, look, it's been working. That's why banks are not moving from mainframe as fast as they could is, look, if 1% of my share price drops because for 5 seconds I'm showing the wrong numbers on people's accounts, that is so much more than 10 years paying IBM to maintain that computer. Just, don't touch.
We work with banks that are like, for these clusters, they have to be provisioned for Black Friday. And we don't care how much that's going to cost us.
Yes.
Even though we know we don't need it outside of Black Friday, it has to be provisioned for Black Friday, because any second we're down is millions of dollars lost.
Exactly.
Do you, in our notes, we talk a bit about creating some FinOps maturing. Do you find clients are interested in any sustainability data and stuff these days? Is it mixed?
I think it's definitely changed in the last few years where people, and this sounds terrible, but are caring less.
I agree.
More in the US. In Europe, when we talk to customers, there's still a push. Even just the conversations at like KubeCon EU are very different than KubeCon US. And I'll say like the highlight stories are people using green ops initiatives to help like cater to the human and the like, hey, you could help the environment. There's a lot of waste here. If we get these down, then we're also reducing our carbon footprint and we're reducing our overall impact. And like kind of,
it's not their money, but it is their planet.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That works more in Europe than it does in the US. So I've seen less initiatives on it, if I'm being honest. But what has recently changed, even just in the last 3 months, so it's not necessarily green ops, is the cost of hardware. And not just the cost of hardware, but the availability of hardware. We have customers saying, like, I can't order anything. I can't. They don't have it. They don't have any new servers for me until like 2027, 2028. And like, how do you operate as a business if you can't go get hardware? Obviously, you'll go look at other hardware solutions. You'll try and find something, but you're going to pay.
Well, because you're competing with everyone else that's scarcity as well, right?
Well, you're competing with the 200 and extra billion of capex, which cannot be provided at the moment. Memory is missing absolutely everywhere. We are on a maelstrom at the moment of hardware costs, and some of them can manage it, but most will not be able. Will have raise of costs, or a new generation are going to be delayed. Whatever the way you use it, you'll have to raise the price in some form or way.
I remember being at a talk and event last year in Miami where I was talking about green ops, and it might seem odd that I flew somewhere to speak about green ops, but I hopefully made a bigger difference than my flight. And the talk before me was this guy saying, this is the future. Every company is going to have all of these agentic AI workflows and all this. That's going to be the footprint of every company. And I just turned to the person next to me and said, there's not enough electricity in the world to do that. Yet alone, like the compute power, scarcity is greater than people believe, right? And so this falsehood, and we remember like a project that we were part of a long time ago, Yasmin, where a scientist called Igor tried to use all of the spare GPU in all three clouds available on Spot at the same time.
For 1 hour,
It ended up being 2 hours, didn't it? Because we couldn't hit an exaflop. The capacity, even then, when there's this kind of falsehood of like the cloud being limitless, was half of what we expected.
Yeah, it was fun because we were talking for the first time ever. I was on the phone with the data centers people. I say, I don't want to know the artificial. We have infinite GPUs. How many numbers? Yeah. And we had those numbers, and you look at them and say, oh, Igor, we're not going to be able to spend that money. No chance.
Yeah. It's an interesting problem as a FinOps company to turn around to someone and say, I'm sorry, you can't, we're not going to hit your budget.
We had another like that, which were a massive company who could not stop instances of VMs because they were not sure to have it back, because they say we consume, so one of the three hyperscalers, they say we consume more than 75% of that hyperscaler's data center consumption. So we know they're always full, because we consume that. And if we turn something off, there is a good chance that another normal consumer will come in. So we don't turn stuff off. I was like, okay, that's interesting use of cloud.
Well, I mean, it's a real problem at the moment. Yasmin, I imagine, your product's quite sizable, and you've also got the managing of your own infrastructure. Have you found the scarcity a bit of a challenge in yourself in terms of growth and things like that? Or
for us, not so much, because we just run on, and like we try and optimize this as much as possible on our own backend. We run on AWS, but like we use Spot for as much as possible. Yeah. We're using Carpenter. We're using our own product to right size. So we haven't seen this as much of a challenge, but we do have customers that have this exact challenge, even just kind of holding on to nodes and not giving them back to the pool. Like that is something we've run into. Yes. But this scarcity is what is now like very recent in the last few months, really pushing people to, I need to right size because I can't go buy more hardware. I'm not going to get access to it. This is all I have. How do I make what I have last me another 1-2 years? And there's so much waste. Like these are companies where I'm like, oh, like what do you think your utilization is? And they're like, yeah, single digits. And they laugh because they know it's like single digits. And sadly, I'm like, you're not alone. Like, don't be embarrassed, maybe be embarrassed, but don't be, because you're not alone. I don't know. But they know there's waste. There's just
single digits.
I see.
Wow.
Almost everyone. Everyone is in single digit usage.
I thought people would be like 20%, but single digits.
Well, I think the challenge is that, again, that abstraction layer where you allocated the resources. So when you look at like your allocated versus your available, maybe there's not that much, but the problem is what you're actually using is so low. That's where the utilization is single digits.
So there was a study in 2015. So 11 years ago now, by the British government. It's the odd things I remember, which basically said, because back then virtualization existed, but still dedicated servers were a big part of what was going on. And the study basically said people need to move to virtualization because on average, people were wasting 88% of their dedicated server.
But I
was new infrastructure, new technology, same problem.
Yeah, I think there is also a fact that we look at one measure, and most of us, including myself, I'm biased when I say those capabilities or capacity usage is we focus on the CPU quite often. It's also because AWS used not to show memory. I used to work with a company. We were measuring 4 metrics, which was network, CPU, storage and memory, and always it was memory. Performance issues were storage usually because we had enough memory, but consumption was memory. It's most workloads, and it was Java time, but almost every workload will just eat all the memory, and the CPU is so performant. It's the first time we have the opposite problem. Is now we need to feed the memory because we still need to max the memory, but we need to feed it. So we're building CPUs just to feed the memory, which I find incredible. We're back to CPUs now. Everyone's doing a new CPU, but it's these are standard problem. And the interesting bit also is, I was coming from a very old background on managing servers. We had a certain number of servers. We had to make it better to, as Yasmin was saying, we had to use them. And that was it. To say buying new servers would take months. Yeah. And so you had part of the release was not the marketing thing goes, we need to improve, we need features. We also had, we need to stay in what we have and deliver the same. And that's funny because that language is coming back due to that scarcity because we were just ignoring it. I have an amazing book there, which is called Programming Pearls. And it tells you it was ages ago, but it tells you problem that when you read them, you say that is impossible to solve. And including... I don't remember what it was exactly, but they say, no, instead of using bytes, we've decided to use bit to identify what was on and off. And they say, hey, we've multiplied by 8 our capabilities. And I'm like, this is just genius. So we've completely lost that bit. We have so many layers of abstraction that even opening a page, static page on Chrome now is 500 meg. And you look at it, I mean, seriously?
As a tab hoarder, I often have to go in and kill services. And that exact problem you mentioned with Java is now just multiplying in Kubernetes. It's so common that we can right size, but there's still, because of Java's very memory hungry. And if you give it memory, it's going to use it. And so until you can actually get into the JVM, see the heap metrics, you're not going to be able to safely right size that. And so most people don't. And Java on Kubernetes is growing at a crazy rate that I did not expect.
Our friend Devere, who we saw on Tuesday, exceptionally clever man, Yasmin, who used to be at Wix.
Yes, he used to be at Wix now.
And he's now with Run It With. He gave a talk 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I can't remember.
I think it's a couple of years
about
ago.
100% utilized wastage, which is this idea, if you look at Elasticache as an example, right, and you look at the utilization, it will say 100%. Because it's meant to be 100%. Yep. But you actually need to look at your hit rate, which might be 20%. So actually, you've got 80% wastage. But if you just look at your memory utilization, it will say 100%. And it's interesting, like I say, it's those memory-hungry things that actually, it doesn't matter how much memory you give it, it will always eat it. Yes. So you've got to pull that constraint.
But it's also because it's just harder to configure. I used to tune to an aggressive on JRocket, which was the BA stuff. I used to tune my JVM to the maximum, know every parameter. This is some sort of, I would say, the wizardy things that's getting lost because either we pass it to the hyperscalers usually, or to someone to manage for us, and I'm not sure they do the management, or there is so much power and abundance that we just can afford to ignore them. And we just decide to ignore them. And we say, hey, JVM, take all the memory that is available on that server.
But like you say, we can't.
And now people can't ignore it anymore, though, because when you're talking about
to
hardware
this,
cost, you can only use so much of that hardware because your memory is eating up whatever it needs, and it thinks it needs more. And until you can get to that, I'm going to actually change the parameters, you can't right size safely. You can right size, but you can't do it safely.
I'm going to change my headline on LinkedIn to Java Virtual Machine and Database Optimizer. I'm going to have business.
Nice. Well, this has been super, super interesting. I think the first thing this tells me, Yasmin, is you'll have to come back at some point, probably to talk about the topic we were meant to talk about, because we've gone in so many different directions.
We'll do the same. Come on.
Yeah, well, exactly. We'll do the same thing. But super interesting. Very interesting to see kind of your history and how you've got here. And, you're obviously technically brilliant. I want to ask one final question. In your world, whether you talk about this being as Stormforge, or whether you talk about it kind of just being in Kubernetes optimization, other than what we've just said around the scarcity thing, what do you think's next? What's like the next step that people need to start thinking about that maybe they're not thinking about?
I think so. We did a survey recently that I also didn't mention earlier. I should have around the trust piece, and it's just like all the quotes are incredible. Of like people don't understand it. It's funny, Frank. One of the things you mentioned of your story that is a lot more real than one of the quotes was like 5 an outage. I'm not going to go touch that resource for another 6 months, which makes sense. But like an outage is very different than somebody is literally in the hospital, needs blood in 5 minutes. Like that, different extremes, same problem, same feeling of I'm not going to go touch this anymore. So what's next for us is being able to really help organizations get to auto deployment in production. And I could tell you, like, our customers, sure, they're there, but like that's different. They've gone through that journey. It's how do people have that buy-in and get to that comfort, because they need to. Like, we're talking to organizations that are at the point where they need to now. So it's how do you help them shape their comfort levels, build that trust in the tooling, in the vendor, in their own teams to get to, I'm actually deploying these things in production comfortably. We could talk about like technology, what's next. We have a bunch of things on our roadmap. We're expanding to GPUs because like that's what people are asking about. How do I manage my like AI spend on Kubernetes? How can I right size? We have our own problem with that internally. So dog fooding, of course. So there's like, what are we doing from a technology standpoint and our roadmap there that I'm super excited about. And even just helping people, because we have customers all over with all different types of infrastructure. Our cloud management platform supports basically anything you want to do. So like expanding that even to NeoCloud support, and where you deploy, you shouldn't have to think about it. What you right size, you shouldn't have to think about either. So like from a technology standpoint, that's where we're headed. But it almost doesn't matter if you're not helping the people along. And so just pushing that focus of how do we get the people to where we know they want to go and they know they need to be.
Yep. Fantastic. Brilliant. Frank, any more questions from you?
No, not any more question. I think that was a brilliant. I really like the human aspect, as like you. That's the reason I really moved away from my cave and decided to go and talk to people, because it is so much, on one side, more complicated, but in a good way. You can do things there that you can't do just on your own.
Far less control.
That's what I like about my role. I always tell people I'm in infrastructure by accident. I don't know that I ever I went to business school. I don't even have a computer science background. So I never chose to go into engineering, infrastructure, Kubernetes, any of those things. But what I like about it, the thing that drives me, these are hard things. These are people behind the seat on the keyboard. How do you make it so that those people can go home to their families? They don't have to worry about something in the middle of the night. How do you make their life easier? Because this should not be their entire day job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a historian by education.
Very cool.
God knows how I did this. I don't know. I don't know.
Podcasts are kind of like history. You talk about the history.
We do. That is true. At least I can tell my parents I use it for something. But there we go. But Yasmin, thanks so much. Frank, thank you for being here as
you.
always. And
for
listeners,
having me.
thank you. No, absolutely. And listeners, thank you for listening. And apologies for this one being delayed, but we will speak to you soon with the main news before we believe it when I get back off holiday, Frank. Apologies in advance.
Yes, and we have other interviews coming in, so we're going to recover the lateness we had since beginning of the year.
Indeed. Fantastic. Okay, well, bye, everyone. Thank you very much.